And the first step has been complete, that umbilical demating that provided power and data from International Space Station to Dragon.
So now with Dragon getting ready to undock and the umbilicals have separated, let's go to Brandy in Mission Control at Johnson Space Center for updates.
Thanks, Sadie. That confirmation of the umbilical retraction means that a series of steps have been set off. Right now, the first set of 6 out of 12 hooks should be retracting. That starts just a split second after the undock command is sent. There are 2 sets of 6 for 12 in total. Take about 4.5 minutes in all to unhook, after which time the Dragon will be able to begin performing a series of undocking burns to move itself away from the space station. Again, that first set of 6 hooks should be retracting right now. Live view here of the Dragon from the cameras on board the International Space Station. When it does move away from the space station, you should be able to see that in real time. Again, waiting as the 12 hooks that are holding the Dragon to the space station begin to unhook.
Dragon SpaceX on the big loop. First set of hooks open and nominal.
Copies, we see the same.
Confirmation there from the core in Hawthorne that the first set of hooks was able to unlatch as expected. Now working on that second set of 6 hooks. Those 12 hooks have been holding the Dragon to the space station. And once they've all retracted, the Dragon will begin to perform a series of burns that will move it away. That's still about a minute or so away. First undocking burn should come at 7:34 p.m. Central Time. The first burn is only a minute and a half, or second and a half long, and will be quickly followed by a 5-second burn, undock burn 2, at 7:35. And then almost immediately after that, a 16-second departure burn 0. Halfway through that second set of hooks.
Dragon SpaceX on the big loop. All hooks open and nominal.
Dragon copies, we see separation.
Mike Hopkins there confirming what you're seeing on the screen. Dragon moving away from the International Space Station.
Dragon separation visually confirmed.
And SpaceX concurs.
That undocking taking place at 7:35 p.m. Central Time, 5:35 p.m. Pacific, while the station and Dragon were 260 miles above Mali. That wraps up Crew-1's stay on the International Space Station, begun in November, and puts them on a path.
SpaceX on the big loop. Depart burn 0 complete. Nominal burn.
Advanced copies, we see the same.
And confirmation there of the first of several good burns taking place. Again, there are 2 undocking burns that occur almost back to back, and those will be followed by departure burn 0. That's the first of 4 departure burns, known as, again, departure burn 0. It's a short firing of the Dragon's Draco thrusters, lasting 16 seconds and increasing the Dragon's speed by just under half a mile. That gets Dragon flying away from the space station and sends it on a trajectory that will take it up and around the space station.
Resilience departing. Have a safe trip back home and the soft landings. Firm, resilient. Thanks for your hospitality. Sorry we stayed a little bit longer. We'll see you back on Earth. Be back in a couple months.
Space Station Commander Aki Hoshide, they're bidding Crew-1 goodbye as they move away from the International Space Station. Again, that departure burn 0 was complete and nominal, so that sets the crew on their way home for the day. Again, we did have undocking right on time at 7:35 p.m. Central Time, 5:35 p.m. Pacific. The station was flying 260 miles over Mali. We're going to be monitoring Crew Dragon throughout the departure sequence as it makes its way from the International Space Station. So wishing Mike, Victor, Shannon, and Soichi safe travels on their way home. But to take you through the rest of the departure sequence, I'll be sending you back over to Leah and Andy and Hawthorne. Thanks.
Thanks, Brandy, and great to see that successful undocking of Crew Dragon Resilience. You can still see it on your screen. The station is in an orbital nighttime. That's where this view is coming from, but very cool on the right-hand side, those 2 white dots.
Station step 4, ISS thrusters enabled.
Houston copies.
Those 2 white dots on the spacecraft, those are actually the windows. So that is our crew of 4 inside, now beginning their journey back to Earth, having departed right on time. Dragon ship Resilience is now on a trajectory to move up and over the station before additional maneuvers will change its orbital path to take it below and in front of the station. Dragon will autonomously accomplish that through 3 additional departure burns to get the 4 astronauts of Crew-1 well away from the space station and on their way home.
Yeah, it's quite interesting that Dragon decides to move up and over. The way I like to think about it is if you've ever watched a track race, when they start the track race, they stagger the folks, and the person in the outer lane is sort of gets a head start, so to speak. But that's because the distance it takes to travel around the lap is much greater for the person further away from the center. And so with Dragon, what we do is Dragon and International Space Station are, generally speaking, traveling at the same speed. And so if we just move it up to a higher orbit, it'll move relatively slower than the International Space Station, which would just clear it. And then once it's clear, it can start to fire those thrusters again and make its way underneath the International Space Station and be clear of any potential sort of collisions. So you may have noticed that our average time from liftoff to the International Space Station is somewhere between 23 and 24 hours. But when we leave, it's a lot quicker. It's because we don't have any hold points during departure sequence, right? We can just kind of undock and start to head home with all of our burns. It takes a lot less time to leave than arrive. Any second now, we are expecting the next departure burn, the second of 4. This burn will increase the initial opening rate between Crew Dragon and the space station.
And even though this is known as Departure Burn 1, it, like you mentioned, is the second. We just completed Depart Burn 0, which was about 16 seconds, and this one should be about 21 seconds long. So we are standing by any moment now for that call.
And we are continuing to see a view from the International Space Station. There goes the Draco engines firing. That is Dragon. And those 2 white lights, the solid white lights, again, are the windows. And I'm sure the crew is looking back at the International Space Station as they continue to depart.
And we just got a note that depart burn 1 has started. As we mentioned, this is
Dragon SpaceX on the big loop. Depart burn 1 is complete. Nominal burn. You are go to doff your suits per procedure 4.012. Cameras are already external. Reminder that ground will be deactivating the big loop following exit from the approach ellipsoid.
And SpaceX resilience copies good depart 1 burn. We have a go to doff the suits 4.012 and copy on the comm.
And it was over about as soon as it started. That depart burn 1 lasting about 21 seconds, and that came around 5 minutes after separation tonight. This burn will increase the initial opening rate between Crew Dragon and the space station. And we heard that the crew is now go to take off their spacesuits, so they don't have to wear their suits until it's time to really start the deorbit procedures. They can be in those comfort garments and be comfortable inside the vehicle. We really just want them to have those suits on and be in their seats for those first major burns as we leave the International Space Station, and then once again when we come back into Earth's atmosphere.
Yep, continuing to get good news all around with undocking, departure, and the second of 4 burns complete. We're now waiting for Dragon to exit the keep-out sphere and the approach ellipsoid. The keep-out sphere is an imaginary sphere 200 meters in diameter around the station. It's one of several safety zones set up to govern visiting spacecraft either arriving or departing the station. Before moving into the keep-out sphere, the spacecraft would have to be configured where they would not cross the imaginary boundary for at least 4 orbits, even if the spacecraft were to somehow lose control of its maneuvering.
The approach ellipsoid, or AE, is another imaginary shape, this time a 3-dimensional ellipsoid measuring 4 kilometers by 2 kilometers by 2 kilometers. It's in the same family as the keep-out sphere. One of the key differences with the AE is that vehicles outside of it have to be on what we called a 24-hour safe free drift trajectory. So similar, but this means that the spacecraft would not cross into the approach ellipsoid for at least 24 hours again.
Station Houston on the big loop. Dragon has exited the keep-out sphere.
Station copies, thanks.
Crew Dragon now outside the keep-out sphere, still inside that approach ellipsoid, and the next burn will be depart burn 2. That comes up at 6:28 Pacific time, so a little less than 45 minutes from now. That's a 44-second burn. That keep-out sphere, as we mentioned, one of several safety zones set up to govern visiting spacecraft either arriving or departing the station. Whether those have crew members on them or not, we're always tracking what's in the vicinity or the neighborhood of our space station. So before moving in the keep-out sphere, we had to know that the spacecraft is configured to not cross that imaginary boundary for at least 4 orbits, even if it lost all control of its thrusters. And that can be a hold point at some times on the way uphill or the way to station, but as you've noticed on the way home, it's not somewhere that we have to hold. We can simply move right through it and continue the journey.
And Dragon continuing to distance itself from the International Space Station. We'll hear a call here shortly that it has passed the approach ellipsoid, a bit bigger of an imaginary shape around the International Space Station with an ellipsoid measuring 4 kilometers by 2 by 2. This is another view of Dragon, getting a little bit of light. Again, you can see the windows right above the red and green lights.
We are looking for that approach ellipsoid exit to come up around 5:54 p.m. Pacific time, so less than 10 minutes from now. It is significantly bigger than the keep-out sphere, but this is a cool picture of Dragon. You can see the capsule down toward the bottom of your screen and then the trunk near the top. And on the trunk on the white side, that's the radiator. It helps radiate heat, and I love this glow right now. The sun is coming up on the space station and onto Crew Dragon.
Wow, that is cool.
SpaceX resilience comm check on the cabin mic.
SpaceX on the big loop. I hear you loud and clear. How me?
We have you the same. Good com check.
The International Space Station and Dragon are just over the Black Sea right now. They're moving so fast that they'll see a sunrise or sunset is every 90 minutes. 17,500 miles per hour is how fast they're moving.
And these movements that we see are the camera moving. Dragon is moving itself, but not quite as quickly as we see these movements happening right now.
And just a few weeks ago, this crew and this vehicle had a bit of practice. On the first week of April, the crew had donned their spacesuits, entered the vehicle, and undocked and relocated themselves from one port to another. So that while they didn't quite exit the approach ellipsoid, they got pretty far out there where they had to turn on their LiDAR and redock with the International Space Station.
Yeah, it was definitely a dress rehearsal. All 4 crew members got suited up, got in their seats, strapped in, just in case that the redock did not occur. But as we saw, everything worked well. And that was to move Crew Dragon from the forward-facing port on the Harmony module to the space-facing port, where it just undocked from, and that leaves that space vacant. Crew 2 docked to the forward Harmony port last week when they arrived aboard Crew Dragon Endeavour. And now that the zenith-facing or space-facing port is empty, SpaceX Commercial Resupply Mission 22 can move in later this summer and bring along with it some research for the crew, food, supplies, as well as the new solar arrays that we'll be looking to install.
Yeah, it's going to be quite a busy year for the Dragon program. It's been an exciting couple of weeks with the relocation, Crew 2 heading on up there, now Crew 1 departing. And then, like Leah mentioned, we have a CRS mission in the summer, as well as 2 more crewed missions using the Dragon vehicle in the fall with Inspiration 4, as well as the Crew 3 mission, sorry.
And before Crew Dragon came home today, there were a long list of activities that needed to be checked off. Earlier this week, it's a very interesting thing to see, and I believe that there was a photo shared of it. I'm not sure by who, but the Canadarm2 was used to check out the exterior of the vehicle and look at the heat shield for any micrometeoroid or orbital debris. Obviously, they got a green light because they have departed.
So we are continuing to track Dragon, as seen on screen. Today, the splashdown will be at nighttime off the coast of Panama City, Florida. Again, that is the first nighttime splashdown since the Apollo 8 mission in 1975.
The first trip of humans around the moon.
Yes.
Fascinating.
It's been quite a while, so very excited to see Dragon returning back to Earth and in moonlight.
And you might be able to tell, but it looks like Crew Dragon has moved position a little bit. It is maneuvering to the next altitude for this upcoming depart burn 2, making sure it's in the, or I should say burn attitude, is in the proper position for those thrusters to fire and keep it on track for that splashdown off the coast of Panama City, Florida. And now we are looking at about 5 minutes until depart burn 2. Now we've got a really zoomed in view. You can clearly see that nose cone open. Crew Dragon 6.5 kilometers away from the International Space Station. And it looks like we have people in the seats, but not quite. Those are just the suits.
I had to take a second look because I thought that they were also in the suits as well. They are hooked up to the umbilicals and we're drying, and we got confirmation a few minutes ago that the drying has been complete. But yes, I took a quick second because one of them had the visors down I saw, or maybe it was the backdrop of the back of the helmet. But
Yes.
the suits are in place. There's no one in them right now. The crew is, looks like they are chatting about or getting ready for the next departure burn.
Yes, that's very funny. I mean, that's the best place to store the suits, absolutely.
Makes sense.
And those are the 3 displays that we were talking about. Those are touch screens, and in the center one you can see the Earth, and they are able to monitor where Crew Dragon is in relativity to the International Space Station, in relation to their splashdown location. They're able to monitor the burns, and as we mentioned, we've got one coming up in just about 2 minutes. That'll be Depart Burn 2, lasting 44 seconds.
And that is the Dragon vehicle that, again, the crew members that we just saw, they are in that vehicle and are in space right now, continuing to make their way back to Earth.
And we have about 1 minute until Depart Burn 2. The International Space Station, that's where the view was coming from. This one back inside the capsule, but they are both flying about northeast of New Zealand, about 267 statute miles. Of course, Crew Dragon just a few miles off of that. We're standing by for Depart Burn 2. And there's Soichi Noguchi in the background. Looks like this might be their dinner, their evening meal, or snack at least.
We just saw that last shot was Mike Hopkins, and then right before him we saw Victor Glover to the right-hand side. Interesting thing about this vehicle, later on this year, we'll launch the astronauts as part of the Crew-3 program. This capsule will be the capsule that they will be sitting in. So it will be refurbished when it lands, make sure that everything is working as planned, and then we will send this back up later on this fall.
And as you saw with Crew Dragon Endeavour, the capsule does not change its name once it has been named. Crew 2, their capsule was dubbed Endeavour by Bob Behnken and Doug Hurley last year on the Demo 2 mission, and Crew 1 named this capsule Resilience, so those names will live along with the vehicles.
Dragon, SpaceX, burn complete, nominal burn.
And SpaceX, resilience copies.
That was Depart Burn 2, a 44-second burn, exactly where we needed to be, coming at 6:28 p.m. Pacific time, using a combination of those service section and forward bulkhead thrusters. That was done at the orbital apogee, which is the highest point in Dragon's orbit, and it's lowering the perigee, the lowest part in the orbit, to below the space station. So those first burns took us up and over the space station. This will take us down and under it. This will start bringing it beneath and in front of the station's orbit. And then, as we've seen, the crew has begun having their last meal on Dragon.
A bit early
before returning to Earth, but how can you tell somebody when they're hungry not to eat?
They have MREs, but they also have some snacks on board as well. I'm not sure what the snacks are, but they must be good. At about 7:14 p.m. Pacific time, we'll have the 4th and final departure burn. It's called Departure Burn 3, but it is the 4th one. And that will put the Dragon roughly co-elliptic with the International Space Station, just 10 kilometers beneath it the entire way around the Earth.
And it's now 6:30 p.m. Pacific time, meaning it has been exactly 1 hour since the undock command was issued to Crew Dragon. Everything moving on time and on schedule so far, with Crew Dragon's undocking and those 2 short burns to break the stiction.
This is an animation of the 4 burns. So we've completed 3 so far, and again, waiting on the 4th one. Once we get to the 4th one, we're basically going to be co-elliptic with the space station, about 10 kilometers beneath it. And then we'll move on to the deorbit burn in a couple hours, and that will lower the orbit altitude enough where Dragon will start to re-enter the Earth's atmosphere, eventually make its way through the atmosphere, deploy its drogue shoots first, slowing the vehicle and stabilizing it, then eventually the main shoots, and then we'll have splashdown off the coast of, right now, the primary site of Panama City, Florida. And now we have views of the interior of Crew-1. We just saw Mike Hopkins, the commander, and to his side is Victor Glover, to his right-hand side.
In front of them, those are those 3 touchscreen displays that allow them to monitor the status of the vehicle, where they are in orbit, and the next steps coming up during this process of their return to Earth. And then on the left, you can see Shannon Walker there relaxing in her seat. And the far right is Soichi Noguchi, JAXA astronaut. These 4 crew members scheduled to splash down in just about 2.5 hours. Looking forward to welcoming them home after 6 months aboard the International Space Station.
And the team recently donned those suits. In about 15 minutes here, they're going to perform suit leak checks. They will close their visors and make sure that there are no leaks in the suits. In case of a depressurization event, the suits do inflate and provide some level of protection and a habitable environment for the astronauts. Again, these suits are custom made for each of the astronauts and designed in-house here at SpaceX. They are a one-piece suit. Everything is integrated. The helmets, the gloves, the boots are all part of that one-piece suit, and the astronauts really just climb in and start zipping things up. The helmet itself is made of 3D printed nylon, and that white material on the exterior is bleached Teflon, and there are also some gray pads as well, and that is Nomex, which is related to nylon, but it has a couple of different properties, some chemical resistance as well as temperature resistance.
And while the Crew Dragon vehicle is just 10 kilometers lower in orbit than the International Space Station, it is 176 kilometers away. So it has really put some distance between those vehicles through the 4 departure burns we saw earlier. And then that final major deorbit burn coming up here in about an hour and a half, we will be looking for that. It's really a braking maneuver. The vehicle will be slewed or oriented so that the thrusters are pointing into the direction that the vehicle is traveling. We'll fire those thrusters for about 16.5 minutes, and that will slow Dragon enough to help it drop out of orbit and re-enter Earth's atmosphere.
At re-entry, those seats do recline, and they will recline back and up about 26 degrees in preparation for re-entry of the capsule.
In this view right now, you can see this is, I believe, the 40-degree incline or actuation. They are facing really that upper hatch, the hatch that they use to enter and exit the International Space Station. And then at their feet and to the right of that window, you can see the side hatch. That's what they use to ingress or enter Crew Dragon almost 6 months ago, November 15th, when they launched from Kennedy Space Center in Florida. And that hatch is not used from the time they launch until the time they return. That'll be the same hatch that they egress or exit later tonight. A good view of Mike Hopkins and Victor Glover, commander and pilot of this mission. And you can see they have their visors up on their helmets, so they will lower those once it's time for the leak check to make sure there's a good seal within the suit, and the teams will begin flowing nitrox into the suit and pressurizing them. And once there's confirmed a good leak check, like we said, coming up in just a little over 10 minutes from now, they'll be able to lift those visors again until it's time for re-entry.
And Mike Hopkins, the commander, is getting a bunch of different views and information from those touchscreen displays. They do provide a ton of information, especially on re-entry, things like entry angle, capsule perigee, also the time until the deorbit burn once it begins, how long it will be until it ends. They can also see exactly which Draco thrusters are firing at any given time. And again, there are 16 of those Draco thrusters on the Dragon capsule.
And it looks like we have just a signal, loss of signal, some satellite handovers potentially with Crew Dragon, and we may regain those visuals shortly, but a great look inside at our crew members as they continued their journey home. And on the Earth side of things, we've got everything moving along smoothly as well. The WB-57 aircraft departed from Ellington Field recently, and we have that aircraft equipped with thermal imaging cameras, so we look forward to the potential of seeing some infrared imagery of Crew Dragon as it begins re-entering Earth's atmosphere and through splashdown, as well as the crew members, or the team members, I should say, necessary for recovery are all aboard the Go Navigator recovery vehicle or vessel that will be lifting the Crew Dragon vehicle out of the water tonight.
Yeah, it is so cool to see the astronauts in their spacesuits donned up. It's been a while since we've seen them inside. We've mainly been hearing the audio chatter back and forth between them and the core, but we're at a period now where the suits are up and we've turned back on our interior cameras, and they've sort of invited us back on board with them as they continue their journey back to splashdown later on this evening.
We did get a fun look inside the capsule earlier while they were having their dinner. And the crew members were out of their suits, but they left their suits in their seats. So that was a little bit of a funny sight for a moment there. And you can see them maneuvering the displays and taking a look at exactly where they are on the map.
If you look, there's some luggage and cargo stowed right behind them. This view is sort of from the top of the Dragon capsule looking down. So where the cargo is stored, that's sort of the base of the Dragon capsule. And if you were to go all the way through the Dragon capsule, on the other side would be the trunk, which in a few hours here, we're actually going to be jettisoning to make to expose the heat shield and preparing for re-entry.
It also makes the vehicle about 6,000 pounds lighter, I believe. So that trunk will burn up upon re-entry into the Earth's atmosphere, but for now remains attached. Half of that trunk being a radiator to dispel heat from the vehicle, and the other half being solar arrays to help gather power for the vehicle. So we've talked a little bit about the seats, and these crew members are currently their seats are a little more reclined. They're at that 40-degree angle, essentially, and they are, if you were looking at them, they are really facing that forward hatch underneath the nose cone. That's what docks to the International Space Station, and that's what they would fly into and out of at the space station. And once we go for landing or through that deorbit burn, I should say, those seats will actuate and turn up to a 26-degree angle, and so they're still a little bit reclined, and they still have the opportunity to monitor those devices at the front, those touchscreen displays, but it will be properly angled for splashdown to distribute the correct amount of weight onto the seats.
So to the very right of your screen, there is sort of an arm bar and the side hatch. Later on, after splashdown, that is the hatch that they'll be opening up and egressing the vehicle from. This is the same hatch that they used to enter the vehicle back in November of 2000, November 15th in 2020. This hatch, after launch, does stay closed while it's docked at the International Space Station, and they use the forward or top hatch to egress the vehicle when docked at the ISS.
You can see a mirror on Mike Hopkins' left wrist, and that is actually one of the features that is shared with an extravehicular mobility unit. That mirror gives him an opportunity to look at what he cannot turn his head around at and see. And on an extravehicular mobility unit, that is used for the astronauts to control the dials on the front of their spacesuits. So that's how they control volume of comms, as well as the temperature inside their spacesuit. So they use that wrist mirror, and the instructions on the front of their spacesuit are written backwards so that when they're viewed through the mirror, they are read correctly. So that's a neat little, I haven't noticed that before. It's a neat little thing they share.
And that is tricky. I mean, if anyone's ever tried to do something in the mirror, I'm sure it takes quite a bit of training to make sure that, you know, they are coordinated right, especially when they're doing something as important as the spacewalks. So next major event is claw separation. That's coming up at 10:57 p.m. Pacific time. And then shortly after that, we'll have trunk separation. And then at 11:03 p.m. Pacific time, we'll begin the deorbit burn, which lasts about 16 minutes. Earlier today, we had the prop wasting burn where we shed about 80 to 90 kilograms of unneeded fuel. After claw separation, trunk separation, and finishing the deorbit burn, we will have shed a total of 6,000 pounds off of the Dragon. So departing the International Space Station, the Dragon vehicle was about 27,000 pounds. And again, after the deorbit burn is done and before they re-enter the Earth, we're down to 21,000 pounds. And it is important that we try to shed as much weight as possible. The drogue chutes have a tremendous job to stabilize and slow the vehicle down, as well as the main chute. So any unnecessary weight that we can shed will help sort of bolster the functions of both of those parachutes.
One interesting thing I learned about parachutes back in DM2's return last year is how they open slowly. So it's called disreefing. The drogue chutes and the main parachutes, you'll see them, they don't pop out to their full expanded size right away. They open rather slowly and allow that air to come in gradually. And it's really only over a few seconds, but that keeps us from really shocking the parachute system and jolting the vehicle too much, as it's really slowing them down from 350 miles per hour for those drogue chutes, and then from 119 miles per hour for those main chutes.
Yeah, and parachutes are an extremely difficult thing to get right. We've had an extensive amount of testing. I mean, dozens and dozens and dozens of drops and testing to make sure that we have these parachutes and the design right. The CRS missions using the Dragon 1 vehicle also had very similar parachutes. But, you know, this is another function of their design to make sure that, again, they're not, you know, at risk of detaching or shocking our crew members inside or the vehicles. And so that slow, gradual opening is critical to make sure that the spacecraft lands softly in the water.
And once the spacecraft does land, the parachutes will be cut away from the spacecraft. That's another autonomous function. But that keeps the vehicle from being pulled potentially by the wind. And as we mentioned, that should happen autonomously, but the crew does have a button inside the spacecraft that would allow them to do so if necessary. And that deorbit burn should end at 11:19 p.m. Pacific time. Following that, we will close the nose cone a few minutes later. The nose cone is open right now because, as you can see in those screens, those 4 thrusters firing are the 4 bulkhead thrusters, and they are located underneath the nose cone. So we leave the nose cone open right now for the 16.5-minute burn, and we will close it once that is complete. 3.5 minutes into the burn, continuing to monitor the data and continuing to get these great views from inside the cabin. We won't keep these views for the entire return home. As we mentioned, once Crew Dragon really begins its entry into the Earth's atmosphere, we anticipate a loss of signal for about 7 minutes, where we won't be able to receive telemetry or data or video or audio from the Crew Dragon vehicle. However, Crew Dragon is entirely autonomous, flying itself, knows exactly what it needs and where it needs to go. And so hopefully at that point, the astronauts are just monitoring as well. And the reason for that comms blackout is because plasma builds up on the outside of the capsule due to the speed at which the vehicle is re-entering the Earth's atmosphere and building up that heat to around 3,500 degrees Fahrenheit outside the capsule. So a very, very cool view right now. On the left, you've got from the International Space Station, Crew Dragon and its trunk, and on the right-hand side, the 4 astronauts who are inside that small white dot preparing to return to Earth.
Yeah, the distance from the trunk and distance between the trunk and the Crew Dragon vehicle is continuing to get larger and larger, and the deep orbit burn does effectively what his name says. We're taking the vehicle out of orbit and lowering its altitude until eventually, we make its way back to Earth.
We're now 5 minutes into the deorbit burn, about 11 minutes left. Crew still monitoring, and teams here in Mission Control Hawthorne still monitoring as well.
This crew has been in space for about 6 months. Their journey started on November 15th of last year, and now really they're on their last section before they can return back to Earth and get that fresh air that we all love.
Now that the deorbit burn has started, we really are less than an hour away from splashing down. We are expecting splashdown to occur at 11:57 p.m. Pacific time, 6:57 GMT, so really less than 50 minutes away. As we mentioned here on the Earth side of things, everyone is in place on the Go Navigator vessel that needs to be there when the crew arrives. 2 fast boats will approach the vehicle and ensure there are no toxic vapors from those hypergolic fumes that may be present after splashing down. They will also begin rigging the vehicle and prepare it to be hoisted into the nest on Go Navigator. But ahead of all of that, we also have the WB-57 aircraft from Ellington Field in Houston, Texas, that is in position, and we will be awaiting views from the aircraft once Crew Dragon begins its re-entry into Earth's atmosphere. There's a thermal imaging camera on the aircraft that we hope to get some views from.
And at the bottom of those touchscreen displays, you'll notice some buttons, really important functions like shoot deploy or cutting the main chutes. These have dedicated buttons for them. Otherwise, the team can use a number of views to monitor the mission as they're doing right now. Hypergolic fuels or hypergolic propellants are pretty common for space propellants. They are one of their properties is they don't require an ignition source. So once two components are combined, typically a fuel and oxidizer, they will ignite just by being in contact with one another. And it is great for, use in space, but one of the downsides is they can be pretty toxic to humans. So that's why it's super important that when the spacecraft does land, the first fast boat, one of the first things they do is perform a sniff test to make sure that none of that toxic vapor is still in the vicinity, so that way the other personnel can approach and continue with the rest of the recovery operations.
We're coming up on 9.5 minutes into this 16.5-minute maneuver, so approximately 7 minutes left, and everything is looking good. Crew's still monitoring those thrusters in the screens on their displays. And this is the final burn of the day. Crew Dragon, as we said, is now committed to splashing down off the coast of Panama City, Florida tonight. And a reminder of the astronauts that are coming home today. Their closest to the screen is Mike Hopkins. He's the commander, and to his right is Victor Glover, the pilot. To Victor Glover's right is Shannon Walker. And to Mike Hopkins' left, we have Soichi Noguchi, an astronaut with the Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency.
So closest to your screen is Crew Dragon Commander Mike Hopkins. A little bit about him. He was born in Lebanon, Missouri, but grew up outside of Richland, Missouri. He was selected as an astronaut by NASA in 2009. Hopkins is a colonel in the United States Air Force and holds degrees in aerospace engineering. He also flew on the Russian Soyuz as a member of the Expedition 37 and 38 crew, logging at the time 166 days in space. He performed 2 spacewalks totaling almost 13 hours to change out a degraded pump module on the space station. He also has military experience, including testing the C-17 and C-130 aircraft.
And those 2 spacewalks were from his previous mission. He added to those while he was on the International Space Station during this flight, added a couple more actually. And the deorbit burn, we are just about 4.5 minutes away from that being complete. Things are still looking good. And as a reminder, this is a braking maneuver. So Crew Dragon is firing those thrusters into the same direction that it was traveling. This should slow Crew Dragon down enough to drop it out of orbit. Yeah, and as we mentioned, this is the first time that the vehicles felt this lift and this drag since launch. The atmosphere in space that doesn't exist, and so it's a vacuum, and haven't been feeling this and been able to hear those sounds that you were discussing. So it's quite a different moment after having 6 months in microgravity. They will begin to start feeling some Gs, as we mentioned, between 3 and 5 Gs upon their re-entry. And we are standing by. It's been about 4 minutes now since that loss of signal began. That's an estimated 7 minutes. The plasma is building up on the outside of the capsule as it continues entering the Earth's atmosphere. The temperatures around the capsule building up to 3,500 degrees Fahrenheit. And this view from our WB-57 aircraft with its thermal imaging cameras, we will be looking for the Crew Dragon to come into view, and there you can see it in the entry of Earth's atmosphere. Crew Dragon continuing its journey home.
So there's a material on the bottom of the capsule. PICA 3.0 stands for phenolic impregnated carbon ablator. That is the material that is really shielding the capsule from all of that extreme temperature. And so the capsule itself goes in sort of bottom first, and that lightweight material, and that is just a fantastic shot. That is the Dragon re-entering the Earth's atmosphere as it leaves that trail behind. And then again, that illumination is from all of that heat that is building up due to friction of just the re-entry speeds of Dragon when it meets the Earth's atmosphere.
And that view coming from the boat, Go Navigator. Crew Dragon continuing, as you said, to enter Earth's atmosphere. So having these two views right now, with it being a nighttime splashdown, pretty exciting that we're getting two good views upon reentry into Earth's atmosphere.
So again, a lot of things are happening pretty rapidly here. In about 3 minutes, the first set of parachutes will deploy. They are drogue chutes. They are conical in nature, and their job is to stabilize and begin sort of the initial deceleration of the vehicle, followed very shortly after by the main parachutes. There are 4 of them.
Dragon, SpaceX, comm check.
And SpaceX, this is Dragon, over 4Gs, 42 kilometers.
SpaceX, we have you loud and clear. Expect automated chute deployment.
And Resilience copies. We are at 40 kilometers, 4.34 on the Gs.
That's Commander Mike Hopkins reporting the Gs that they experienced upon reentry. And as you heard, we are now out of that loss of signal portion, meaning the plasma has eroded away enough from the spacecraft.
I think my heart skipped a beat as soon as I heard
Mine
the
too.
crew responding back. And, one thing I did note, as soon as Mike turned on his comms, there was a lot of background noise. And that is sort of, the after effects of Dragon's re-entry.
So this view again from the WB-57 aircraft.
Dragon, SpaceX, a GPS is converged. Expect nominal altitude for drogue chute deploy.
Resilience copies. Nominal altitude for drogue deploy.
Crew Dragon Resilience now 30 kilometers over Earth. It's quite a quick drop over that 100 that we saw just a few minutes ago. And now we'll be looking for drogue parachute deploy within the next minute or so at 11:52 p.m. Pacific time, 6:52 GMT. Those 2 drogue chutes should deploy at 18,000 feet in altitude. Crew Dragon will be moving approximately 350 miles per hour.
Dragon, SpaceX, recovery team reports visual.
Good news, we're at 20 kilometers, seats are rotating.
SpaceX copies on the seat rotation.
And those seats are rotating into the proper landing position. We saw them a little bit more reclined earlier, facing the top of the capsule. And now they are more forward facing towards that side hatch.
We also got confirmation that the recovery teams can also now see Dragon coming back.
Brace for drogues.
Copy, braced for drogues.
So we are waiting for confirmation that the drogue chutes have deployed. We are expecting them to deploy any minute now.
And it looks like those might be our drogue chutes.
Visual 2 chutes.
SpaceX from Resilience, we show good drogues.
SpaceX copies and concurs nominal descent right on 2 drogues.
Continuing to hear good news after good news. 2 drogue chutes have deployed. Everything looks nominal, and we're slowing the Dragon vehicle down. We are expecting the 4 main chutes to deploy within the next minute.
And those 4 drogue chutes. Oh, you can see them being pulled out now.
Visual on 4 mains.
And Resilience copies, and we see a nominal descent rate.
SpaceX copies and concurs nominal descent rate.
And this view coming from the WB-57, very clear image of those 4 main parachutes, slowing the vehicle down to what will be about 16 miles per hour prior to splashdown just off the coast of Panama City, Florida. If it were daylight, we would have an image of those 4 beautiful parachutes being orange and white, and still getting these incredible views, even though we are in a nighttime splashdown.
So we are waiting for visuals of splashdown. The Dragon 1 program had great success with water landing, with 20 successful splashdowns over the course of that program, 9 of which were carried out by flight-proven Dragon spacecrafts.
At space height, you've broken, but we show you just under 800 meters. Still good descent rate.
Just under 800 meters from the Earth. That's about half of a mile. And we are tracking splashdown.
And 600 meters, and we're showing 10 meters per second on the descent rate, a little higher than nominal.
SpaceX copies.
And what a view we have here. Even though it's nighttime, we have some great visuals of Dragon there with its 4 main chutes deployed, slowly coming back to Earth. Splashdown is scheduled for just a few minutes from now.
400 meters.
Now just a quarter a mile away from splashdown. And that splashdown time is scheduled for 11:57 p.m. Pacific time.
And SpaceX, we show nominal descent rates, 200 meters, brace for splashdown.
SpaceX copies, brace for splashdown.
Seconds away from splashdown, everything nominal aboard Crew Dragon Resilience returning to Earth.
And there are the boats starting to chase after Dragon to begin their recovery operations as soon as Dragon lands. And I don't know if you can hear the applause
on splashdown.
But we have visual confirmation of the Crew-1 Resilience capsule.
From Resilience. That is excellent news. We are splashed down. The pyros have fired. We're water.
SpaceX copies and concurs. We do see mains cut as well.
So again, you heard the applause. The Crew-1 capsule has returned. and we have successful splashdown. The main chutes have also cut as well. The fast boats are now making their way towards the capsule to begin the recovery operations. Again, that first boat is going to start to inspect the capsule and make sure that there isn't any residual toxic fumes in the air.
Dragon, on behalf of NASA and the SpaceX teams, we welcome you back to planet Earth, and thanks for flying SpaceX. For those of you enrolled in our frequent flyer program, you have earned 68 million miles on this voyage.
And SpaceX resilience, it is back on planet Earth, and we'll take those miles. Are they transferable?
And Dragon will have to refer you to our marketing department for that policy.
And we are in 1. That's 3.1 of 4.800.
And resilience, please repeat last about 4.800.
Okay, we are at 3, and we show stable 1.
SpaceX copies stable 1. Good news.
So a bit of levity from the crew and the core about the transferable mileage.
And that splashdown coming at 11:56 p.m. Pacific time, 6:56 GMT. We're hearing reports that the capsule is in stable 1 position, meaning it is upright. As we heard, those 4 main parachutes were cut, and those 2 fast boats will soon approach the vehicle. They will be able to, as we mentioned, sniff for those hypergol fuels, as well as attach buoys to the parachutes and make sure they are recovered. The teams have been ready and waiting about 3 nautical miles away, so it's going to take them around 20 minutes to make their way to Mike, Victor, Shannon, and Soichi inside Crew Dragon. And while the teams move in, we are continuing to watch this scene unfold and this view coming from Go Navigator, the recovery vessel on which we will see Dragon hoisted later.
And that was just so cool to see. The teams had visual of Dragon with his chutes deployed, coming back down to Earth, and then you saw the fast boats sort of just as fast as they could, heading over to Dragon, just to make sure that everything can happen as quickly as possible and make sure that the astronauts are safe.
And good news, the recovery vehicle has a go to approach the spacecraft.
Dragon SpaceX, we are go for recovery personnel to approach. Expect personnel alongside in about 1 minute.
And SpaceX from Dragon, that is great news.
And that comes right on time as well. Just 5 minutes after splashdown, those fast boats are going to be able to approach the capsule and put buoys on those parachutes. And the hypergol checks will continue. And eventually someone will help rig up the capsule to be picked up by the Go Navigator once it has to go to approach the vehicle as well. And all of this action coming after undocking from the International Space Station at 5:35 p.m. Pacific time today, just 6.5 hours from them to board the Crew Dragon, or to depart on Crew Dragon and splash down back on Earth after almost 6 months in space.
And here's a aerial shot of those fast boats approaching
Dragon SpaceX comm check.
And SpaceX from Resilience, we're still reading you loud and clear.
Loud and clear as well. We just completed a minor comm configuration. Thanks.
You bet. And we see some lights outside. Looks like some people are getting close.
Affirmative. Quite the welcome home party.
So it looks like that first boat has already made it to the capsule. There are a number of other boats and recovery vessels standing by. And once we clear the area of, from any hypergolic vapors, they'll, move on to the next phases of recovery.
And some of those darker spaces you see there in the water are the parachutes that will be collected later on. But this view, yes, from the WB-57 aircraft that provided us with those infrared images as Dragon was still re-entering the Earth's atmosphere, and then all the way through splashdown as well. So you can see that second boat approaching those parachutes to attach some buoys. It really could not have been a more flawless journey home for Crew Dragon Resilience.
Yeah, we continue to see, nominal call after nominal call from
the Dragon SpaceX. We show hypergol sweeps and unfired ordnance checks nominal. Rigger should come aboard momentarily. Expect about 2-5 minutes until capsule lift. Stand by for PMC with SpaceX flight surgeon.
Okay, Resilience copies all. We're standing by.
The Corps there just said we are clear of any hypergols in the area, so we are starting to send the recovery vessel, and we'll start to hoist up Dragon in about 25 minutes. And then shortly after that, he mentioned PMC, which is the private medical conference. Again, the medical staff are one of the first people to talk to the folks inside the Dragon capsule. So, in about 30 minutes here, we should be seeing the hopefully the astronauts egress from the side hatch of the Dragon capsule.
We also heard them mention the rigger will be online or will be on the capsule shortly. That's the one crew member we were discussing earlier, or one team member, I should say, that will climb on the capsule and begin rigging it for to be hoisted by the Go Navigator vessel. It will help place Crew Dragon into the Dragon nest aboard Go Navigator. Everything's still moving on timeline with this recovery tonight. The first splashdown of a NASA and SpaceX Crew capsule, and the first splashdown for NASA since 1968 with the return of the Apollo 8 astronauts.
And one thing to note, you can see the sheen of the ocean with those lights there, and the sea itself. That could have been mistaken for a beach, but we are in the middle of the ocean, and the seas are just as calm as they can be. Again, weather was something we were tracking, and we waved off splashdown a couple times this past week, but today's conditions seemed absolutely serene. There it is for landing and recovery operations. So it's just a great thing to see that they don't have to combat any type of inclement weather while they're already doing such important work here in the Gulf of Mexico.
So you can see some of those recovery vessels surrounding the capsule. And the crew members on board still just monitoring the status of the recovery, and as Andy mentioned, will participate in a private medical conference to report back on how they are feeling. And once they are brought on board, they'll have an opportunity to be checked out by medical personnel as well.
Seeing some activity of that fast boat around Crew Dragon. That's what's in the middle of the screen right now. There is a much larger recovery vessel nearby that will hoist up Dragon onto the back end of the ship. We're expecting that to happen in approximately 25 minutes.
And I can't tell exactly, but we may already have that person on Crew Dragon beginning to rig it in preparation for when Go Navigator can approach and it be attached to the ship and brought on board.
So this was the primary site that we landed on off the coast of Panama City in Florida. We did have an alternate site off the coast of Tampa. There was an equivalent amount of personnel and hardware and ships ready to perform the same type of recovery operations in the event that Dragon had to choose that site over the primary one. But things continuing to go smooth.
And we did get a report that the crew is feeling well inside the capsule, just what we wanted to hear. Of course, they will still have that private medical conference and they will still receive medical checkouts once they arrive on Go Navigator. But amazing preliminary news that the crew reports that they are feeling well. And that's quite a feat in itself, to be feeling well after 6 months in microgravity and to return to gravity. So great news all around tonight with the return of Crew Dragon Resilience. Coming up on just about 15 minutes since we had splashdown today. This evening, that splashdown coming at 11:56 p.m. Pacific time, 6:56 GMT. And now you can, a little more clearly on the right-hand side of the capsule, see the person who is preparing it for their to be picked up by Go Navigator with that rigging system. And that's right on time as well.
And so this is the Resilience capsule. It flew for the first time in November of last year. And when it flew, it was pristine and white. And now we've got a little bit of toastiness on its side. And some people have described the re-entered capsule as a sort of a toasted marshmallow. And again, that is just from all the heat on re-entry. It is continuing to stay buoyant in the Gulf of Mexico. The Dragon vehicle itself is designed to be waterproof. And in the event that there is a breach, we do have some abilities to pump water into some bladders in the capsule to make sure that it stays buoyant for as long as possible. But everything continues to go well. We are now seeing a even better view of the rigger on top of the Dragon capsule, preparing it for hoisting later on in a few minutes here.
And that's a great picture. You can see just how calm the sea really is. That is the Gulf of Mexico.
Yeah.
It's pretty amazing that it's that truly glassy, as we heard described earlier. A great view of the capsule now and the person preparing it to be hoisted on to Go Navigator. And as a reminder, we're going to remain live with you throughout this coverage up until The crew has been extracted from the vehicle. And this another view from Go Navigator. You can see the nest right there. That's where Crew Dragon will be placed once it has been hoisted onto the vessel.
And we have some people stepping in on the nest, and you can just see sort of the scale of that nest and really the boat. The Dragon capsule is, you know, throughout today we've seen it from a distance.
Brazilian SpaceX recovery is proceeding nominally at this time. The recovery vessel is backing up towards the spacecraft and proceeding nominally.
And you can see Crew Dragon resilience within the frame of that hoist mechanism on Go Navigator. The report going out to the crew that things continue to proceed nominally, and we can see that for ourselves as well. The Go Navigator will continue backing up to Crew Dragon until it's close enough to attach those lines and hoist the spacecraft onto the nest there at the bottom of your screen.
As we were saying earlier, the scale really doesn't really put into perspective until you start to put people around. The capsule itself is over 20,000 pounds, and so.
Dragon SpaceX repeat call. We are proceeding nominally. It looks like the recovery vessel is about one boat length away, backing up towards the spacecraft.
That is great news, SpaceX. Looking forward to it.
Continuing to proceed nominally, Go Navigator is backing up towards the Resilience capsule as the team of recovery personnel continue to get Dragon on top of the nest there that you see on screen.
And once Crew Dragon is lifted onto the nest, it will shortly afterward be pulled toward the egress platform, or the platform that allows them to exit. That platform is built up towards near the that forward hatch, and it should allow them to more easily exit the vehicle. Now been 20 minutes since tonight's splashdown. 6:56 GMT, 11:56 p.m. Pacific time. Mike Hopkins, Victor Glover, Shannon Walker, and Soichi Noguchi, all inside Crew Dragon, and recovery operations proceed nominally.
So we are now waiting excitedly for the recovery of our Dragon spacecraft with NASA astronauts Mike Hopkins, Victor Glover, Shannon Walker, and JAXA astronaut Soichi Noguchi inside. Dragon has already autonomously completed several steps to safe itself following splashdown. For those of you just joining us, the mission has gone smoothly so far. Dragon successfully splashed down in the Gulf of Mexico off the coast of Panama City, Florida at approximately 11:56 a.m. or p.m. Pacific time.
Approximately.
The Dragon SpaceX rigging is complete. Approximately 5 minutes until capsule lift.
Resilience copies, 5 minutes to lift.
And that's good news. They will continue to get closer to the spacecraft with rigging complete, meaning it will be able to be hoisted in 5 minutes from now. But approximately 6.5 hours ago, Dragon autonomously undocked from the International Space Station, completed a series of departure burns, jettisoned its trunk section, and performed its final burn, the deorbit burn, to place itself on a trajectory toward the Gulf of Mexico. Dragon successfully re-entered the Earth's atmosphere, followed by deployment of its parachutes to slow the spacecraft down to a gentle splashdown at just about 16 miles per hour. And we're now following the final part of Mike, Victor, Shannon, and Soichi's journey as Dragon is lifted out of the water and placed on the recovery boat.
Upon detection of landing, Dragon automatically releases the main parachutes to prevent wind from pulling the spacecraft. Dragon then automatically safes any pyrotechnics still present on the vehicle and may automatically perform additional minor system reconfigurations. The astronauts do remain seated and in their suits at this point, but the onboard air conditioning keeps temperatures in check inside of the spacecraft, and the communication systems on board remain powered so the crew can continue to communicate with ground.
SpaceX has 2 fast boats in the recovery fleet, which moved quickly to the splashdown point, and they have been joined by Go Navigator, which is the main recovery vessel in your screen now, and that has moved into position near the spacecraft. Those 2 fast boats have very specific roles. On first approach, it's immediately focused on safety inspection of the capsule integrity and checking for any presence of those hypergolic propellant vapors we've been talking about, ensuring that it is safe for Go Navigator to approach the Dragon spacecraft. Once the capsule is cleared for full approach, the team begins rigging the capsule for water recovery by the recovery ship, which we recently heard was completed. And the second fast boat is responsible for parachute recovery and also serves as a redundant boat to the first. And we saw that team member or on a jet ski helping to gather up the detached parachutes as well.
So it took about 10 minutes for the recovery crew to complete their safety checks. Once complete, the team will begin preparing Dragon to be lifted into the recovery vessel. And as part of this preparation, one member of the recovery team will climb up on top of the capsule and rig the Dragon spacecraft as they just did a few moments ago. And then from there, it will take less than an hour to raise Dragon to the recovery boat and remove the crew from the spacecraft. And then after that, after medical checkouts, the crew will return to land within 4 hours, either by boat or helicopter, depending on the landing site. So if no medical assistance is needed, the crew will depart for Houston.
And if you look very closely, you can see down to the bottom right of the capsule, there is one attachment on Crew Dragon. There will be multiple to keep and there's another on the left. There will be multiple to keep the spacecraft from swinging once it is hoisted out of the water. And it'll very, very quickly be placed on that Dragon nest waiting just below and at the bottom center of your screen. And as you can see, Crew Dragon now at multiple attachment points to that system on Go Navigator.
Dragon SpaceX, expect lift in 90 seconds.
Copy, 90 seconds, thanks, sir.
So about a minute and a half until we see Crew Dragon removed from the water. And there's still a team member up on the front of it. That's likely the same team member who helped rig the system and prepare it for attachment to the vessel. And as we mentioned earlier, this splashdown, a new record, breaking the old record for the longest crewed capsule in orbit from America, previously held by the final Skylab crew at 84 days, 1 hour and 15 minutes. And this crew returning with 168 days in space and doubling that previous record.
Dragon SpaceX, brace for capsule lift.
Go ahead, Sol. We cleared the lift.
Crew Dragon Resilience now out of the water and being prepared to be placed on that Dragon nest in the center of your screen at the bottom. And just an hour ago, this capsule had just completed the deorbit burn and was still in space, and now is being returned to Go Navigator. The first time for these crew members to be on Earth in almost 6 months.
Pretty much on the center of the screen, you can see the side hatch of the Dragon capsule. Later on today, that's where the astronauts will be egressing from. When they were attached to the International Space Station, they exited from the top hatch where the nose cone opens up.
And those two holes, essentially, that you see up toward the top of the nose cone above the...
Resilience, welcome aboard the recovery vessel. Recovery personnel are completing final checks. Stand by for translation of the egress platform in a couple minutes.
Resilience copies.
Those two holes aboard the Crew Dragon above the hatch and close to the nose cone, those are where the drogue parachutes were stored in that upper bulkhead. And there's near a deployable panel, so they're deployed by 2 drogue mortars, which are pyrotechnics fired to deploy the chutes. And those 4 main parachutes are also stored under deployable panels, but those are near the base of the spacecraft, so below that side hatch panel, and those were drawn out by the drogue chutes. Everything just absolutely flawless tonight with the recovery of Crew Dragon Resilience.
So before opening the hatch, the spacecraft's cabin pressure must be equalized with the outside environment. So once the hatch is open, that will be Mike, Victor, Shannon, and Soichi's first breath of fresh air since boarding Falcon 9 at the start of their mission back in November of last year.
And the next visual we are looking for is for Dragon to be pulled toward the egress platform on the Dragon nest. So they will move toward the platform that is up toward the side hatch. That'll allow for easier extraction, removal of the crew members. It's important to note that Mike, Victor, Shannon, and Soichi will be getting assistance from the recovery teams while exiting the capsule. And this is the same process for any returning long-duration crew members, as returning to a gravity environment can essentially wreak havoc with our vestibular system, which is responsible for maintaining our balance and motion. And safety is our #1 priority with this operation, as you've seen throughout not just today, but this entire mission. So you'll see all Mike, Victor, Shannon, and Soichi helped out of the capsule. We won't see them outside of the capsule today, but they will be assisted a few feet to the medical quarters aboard the boat. And we discussed earlier, if you've seen crews return on a Soyuz, it's the same process as when astronauts are carried from the capsule to waiting chairs and then carried into the nearby medical tent. This is also the period where any time-critical cargo can be removed from the spacecraft, with the remainder waiting until the ship is back in port. But once the ship and capsule return, the recovery team will perform additional inspections before loading Dragon onto a flatbed truck at the SpaceX facility in Cape Canaveral for post-processing.
So the crew just secured Dragon onto the recovery vessel, and now it's moving towards the platform where eventually the hatch will open up. We've got more personnel assisting with the recovery operations.
And that platform coming right below the side hatch, making it much easier for teams to help the crew egress or exit the vehicle. And this is the first time that this side hatch will be opened since launch day, November 15th. The hatch that's used on the International Space Station is that forward hatch underneath the nose cone, which is currently closed at the top of the vehicle. So as soon as this was sealed by SpaceX teams back in November, it has not been reopened since. And we see teams still preparing the capsule for that hatch opening.
So it'll still be a few minutes before we have hatch opening. Again, we need to make sure that the cabin pressure is equalized to the ambient pressure outside. The team also performs a few checks to make sure that everything is a go before we open up that side hatch.
It's been about 35 minutes since Crew-1 splashed down, so you can see just how exponent this process already is, having the capsule on board and preparing to open up that side hatch. And all of the parachutes, both the drogues and the main chutes, have been located, and those will be recovered.
SpaceX resilience.
Go for SpaceX.
Hey, Solo, you guys are welcome to come on board with the cameras if you'd like.
SpaceX copies and work.
And Solo, you got one more call before we wrap things up, is that correct?
Affirmative. We have a few technicians just doing some work on the exterior of the hatch. We should be ready to open up shortly, we hope.
Copy.
Now the crew members will not ride this boat all the way back to shore. They will board a helicopter, and that helicopter will take them back to Pensacola, and waiting there will be a NASA plane to bring them back to Houston.
Yeah, it's quite surreal that about 7 hours ago, this capsule was traveling at over...
And Dragon, stand by for side hatch opening and egress.
Okay, Solo, we are standing by. Hey, and while I'm thinking about it, solo for SpaceX and the NASA teams, on behalf of Crew-1 and our families, we just want to say thank you. We want to say thank you for this amazing vehicle resilience. We said it before the mission, and I'm going to say it again here afterwards. It's amazing what can be accomplished when people come together. So finally, I'd just like to say, quite frankly, you all are changing the world. Congratulations. It's great to be back.
And Hopper, thanks so much. You've got a round of applause here in Mission Control. And from all of us, it's truly been epic working with your team from early development through splashdown of the world's first long-duration spaceflight, human spaceflight. Your crew is really a tribute to resilience's name. We wish you all happy reunions with your families and loved ones. And thanks again for flying SpaceX.
Thank you, Solo. Thank you all.
So we had some kind words exchanged from the Corps and Mike Hopkins, the commander. The hatch is now open. We also heard some applause at Mission Control here in SpaceX. Just a tremendous amount of dedication that has gone into this particular mission over the last couple of years. And so we're really seeing the fruits of the labor now, really ending the mission. And, you know, just 7 hours ago, this capsule was traveling at over 17,000 miles an hour in space, docked to the International Space Station. And now it's safely secured back on Earth, and we have the hatch open.
And that hatch opened for the first time, as we mentioned, since launch day, November 15th, 2020. These astronauts completing the first long-duration commercial crew mission and now holding the record for the longest time in space by an American crewed capsule, returning with 168 days. And with that side hatch being open, as we discussed, the first people to speak with Mike, Victor, Shannon, and Soichi are the medical team. And as we heard earlier, the crew did report that they were feeling well, but still important to get checked out after spending 6 months in space. They will eventually be removed from the capsule and put on stretchers to taken to some additional medical checks. We're coming up on 40 minutes since splashdown. That capsule splashing down at 6:56 GMT, 11:56 PM Pacific time. Returning Crew-1 aboard Crew Dragon Resilience. That side hatch now open. Crew members speaking with medical personnel and preparing for egress. Everything was on the timeline for Crew Dragon today, undocking at 5:35 p.m. Pacific time, completing those 4 departure burns, as well as nose cone, or as claw separation and trunk jettison. We had some amazing views from the International Space Station along the way. That deorbit burn lasting the scheduled 16.5 minutes. slowing down Crew Dragon just enough to drop them out of Earth's orbit, begin their re-entry into the atmosphere. We saw both drogue parachutes deploy nominally, followed by 4 good main parachutes and a soft splashdown as scheduled in the Gulf of Mexico off the coast of Panama City, Florida at 11:56 p.m. Pacific Time, 6:56 GMT.
And after splashdown, we saw the 2 fast boats approaching the vehicle. The first one made sure the area was safe for approach, and then one of the riggers climbed on top of the capsule and started preparing it for the eventual hoist and lift onto the boat that is on screen right now, Go Navigator. Really, as soon as we got visuals of Dragon, those boats really headed over there as fast as they could and tried to expedite the process. And now we're here. The capsule is on the boat. It's secured. Our hatch is open, and we have some personnel tending to the astronauts right now and make sure everything is A-OK after what really has been a picture-perfect mission so far.
The crew remains on the timeline to egress or exit Dragon in under an hour after splashdown. So they still have about 20 minutes until we reach, or 18 minutes until we reach that hour mark, and we are perfectly on schedule for the hatch to have been opened at its time. And we just saw one of those tablets being removed that the crew members were using to track the mission throughout the day. Just as it takes a little while to get crew members strapped in properly from, well, preparing for launch, we see the same thing whenever they come home. We want to make sure that everything is done in an orderly fashion and safely for our 4 astronauts.
Seems like we're removing a few parts to make room for the astronauts to egress.
And that looked like those footrests, essentially. I'm not sure the best thing to call them. I can't think of it right now. You can see those 2 windows on either side of the hatch. That's what gave the astronauts a view. Earlier, they said they had a great view of the International Space Station, and even upon launch day, they gave us some views as they were heading to the space station. So those are their 2 windows that they've been able to look out during their journey aboard this spacecraft.
For those just joining us, on screen right now is the Crew-1 capsule Resilience. It has returned from space we are on sort of the back end of the recovery vessel, Go Navigator, and here is, I think that's Mike Hopkins, the commander. He's very excited.
Feeling pretty good after 6 months in space.
This is just excellent to see the astronauts coming out of the Dragon vehicle. So we're just off the coast of Panama City, Florida, and the hatch has been opened. There was some materials that were removed. It looks like the seat rests were removed, or the footrests were removed. And now we just saw the commander, Mike Hopkins, exit the vehicle, do a little bit of a dance.
As we mentioned, these crew members will be making their way over to some medical checks. Standard procedure for us when we have crew members returning from long-duration spaceflight, or any spaceflight really, when we are having crew members return on a Soyuz spacecraft in Kazakhstan. There is a medical tent nearby, and we carry those crew members from the spacecraft to the medical tent for their checkouts. So even though the crew has reported they're feeling good, and it certainly looked like Mike Hopkins was feeling good, they will still get those standard medical checks before boarding a helicopter later this evening to take them back to shore. And once they are on land in Florida, they will board a NASA plane to bring them back to Ellington Field in Houston, Texas, where they can be reunited with friends and family for the first time in almost 6 months.
Yeah, in the bottom left of your screen, there is a stretcher there. Again, that is standard. Returning back to Earth after such a long duration in microgravity has, it can do things to your body. So
those two SpaceX team members preparing to help out the next crew member. And that is NASA astronaut Victor Glover.
And this is a view of Mission Control in Hawthorne. Continuing to support the mission. Yeah, we just saw Mike Hopkins exit the vehicle. Again, things are going pretty nominally. The vehicle had a splashdown at approximately 11:56 p.m. Pacific time. And shortly after that, the recovery team began their operations. We sent fast boats out there to start to sniff out the hypergalls and make sure there wasn't any toxic vapors in the air. Began rigging the boat and eventually getting the Dragon capsule on top of the Go Navigator recovery vessel.
And we saw Mike Hopkins out of the spacecraft first. He did a little dance for us to show us just how good he felt. And then followed by Victor Glover. Victor Glover returning from his first space flight. He was really the newbie on this trip, I guess you could say. He served as pilot of Crew-1, Crew Dragon Resilience. So he was the next out of the capsule. And we are still awaiting 2 more crew members to be removed from the capsule. And they will be checked out by those medical teams on board the ship. But as we heard earlier, they reported that they were feeling well.